All right, we are live on Facebook, guys. If you are on Facebook, please join us in the Zoom. That's where they'll be taking questions, kwdentonlive.com, and click on Zoom. I am excited about today's class. We have Chris Rosprim and Stephanie Harr here to teach you how to do residential leases.
Are we good to go?
Yes, you are.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Glad to have you. My name is Chris Rosprim. I've been here at KW for over 9 years, been in real estate for 50 years. I currently own and operate a property management company, and I manage about 250 properties around the Denton and surrounding area. And with me is my co-host, Stephanie. Well, Stephanie been with us about 5 years now, I think.
About 5 years.
And she does all my leasing and helps me in the property management business, among other things. And we do residential and commercial leasing as well. And she is a big part of that, and especially on the residential leasing, because we have a couple hundred units that we manage, and we're all the time having inventory to lease, from houses to duplexes to condos to you name it, in residential, even property on acreage from time to time. So I've been there, seen that, done that, anywhere from a few $100 to I don't know, about 2,500, 3,000, somewhere around there, probably top out on some of our properties. So we have a bit of experience and perspective on how to do this, and happy to share and impart anything that we can to help y'all when you come across a leasing call, and what to do, what to look for, how to handle it, and from there. So let's get started. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we'll try and get to them. But I think from the perspective of this class is you get a call from somebody, either if you're on call on the phone duty or just out of the blue, you get a call and somebody wants a lease property, and the whole thing is, what do you do with it? How do you do it? So for purposes of this class, we're going to take it from Real Estate 101. If you've been doing this for a long time, then you probably don't need this class, or you're not on this call anyway. So from there, when we get an initial call, and most of those calls, when I get them, I'm going to refer them to Stephanie. So Stephanie, you want to take it? Then when you first talk to somebody about they're looking for a rent property, what do you do to try and help the person out and qualify them?
Sure. So you first want to ask some just general questions from when are you looking to lease? That's a huge that's a huge start. A lot of people will tell you as soon as possible, and that's great. A lot of people will also want to be proactive and know that their current lease is coming up in 4 or 5 months, and they're trying to get a head start and start looking now. In that situation, with the market the way that it is, we're not going to be able to hold, or any property management company is not going to be able to hold a unit for so long, especially if it's sitting vacant. So you would need to use at that point whatever means that you use to track people. You would need to put them into your tracking mechanism and touch base with them again. I would say 6 to 8 weeks out, to where you could start really looking and honing in on a property. The next thing is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for specifically a house or an apartment, a condo? And then where? Do you want it specifically in Denton? Are you fine to go out to Sanger, Louisville? find out the area that they're looking in. And of course, bed and baths, just the general information about what they're looking for. And then any other features. Is there a deal breaker for them? Is there something that they really don't want a house unless if the kitchen has an island or something to that effect? Find out if there's anything like that. And then of course, find out what their budget is. That's going to be big because you will come across a lot of people that want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in Flower Mound and don't want to pay more than $1,300. And that is just not going to be feasible for the most part. And at that point, you always want to have a conversation with, what they're looking at, the areas that they're looking in, what the general consensus is as far as rental properties and, what they can expect so that nobody's getting misled in any direction, thinking that they really might find something of that nature. I'm not saying it's not out there, but it's very uncommon for something like that. And then a huge thing with rentals is, do you have any pets? That is a huge deal breaker on both sides for owners, property managers, and potential tenants. You need to find out if they have any pets. If they do, is it a dog or a cat? If it's a dog, you need to find out what breed it is and go from there. How many dogs, that sort of thing. Right up front, I can tell you that if it's an aggressive breed, it's going to be very, very hard to find a rental for that particular person. And you might want to be upfront with them as well. What we're finding a lot now is that what we're finding a lot now is a lot of people have emotional support animals and service animals. In that situation, no one can turn away an emotional support animal or a service animal, but they will have to have the proper documentation to back that up. Chris, do you want to say anything to that about the emotional support animals or service animals?
Service animals, by federal law, you cannot deny, you cannot charge extra, you cannot charge a pet deposit. So be mindful of the federal law that covers service animals, which is to assist somebody with a physical impairment, such as sight or smell or something of that nature. And there's a lot of people out there that legitimately have those, and you just don't have a choice. Service animals are limited strictly to dogs and miniature horses. There's no service animal as a cat or a duck or whatever. It's strictly limited to dogs, and it can be any breed. So dogs and miniature horses. I've personally not come across a miniature horse, but it is within the confines of the federal law that it's okay. So what we do in our operation is anybody with a pet, and it doesn't matter, pet, dog, ESA, service animal, whatever, must go through petscreening.com. And once they log in, you have to give them a link, but once they log into that, they put in all their information and provide petscreening.com with the support documents to justify and make it legitimate that they do have a true service animal or an emotional support animal. And if they do, it's no charge. If they don't, then there is a fee. Stephanie, you remember what that is? 35?
And this is for our property management team, we use the pet service, petscreening.com, and it's $25.
Okay.
Not every property management will use that, but it's a great tool we found for us anyway.
So they pay that fee and provide the documentation, and then if everything's legitimate, then so be it. But they'll get all those records to support their claim that it's a service animal or an ESA animal, and then you go from there to accept them. But like I say, you can't charge pet deposit, or increased rent or anything else by federal law on either case.
And Dennis, you had the question about paperwork. Do they have to show supporting paperwork for a service animal or an emotional support animal? And yes, I would say any property management company that you're working with or anybody's going to want that supporting paperwork. And it's up to each individual property management company that's taking in the applications as to how they go about that. They may just say, bring me your supporting paperwork and we'll take that. Or they may be more like us where we use a service that will document and make sure that all of that is correct for us.
Good.
All right.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes, absolutely. And then the next thing that I would talk about, and because you're still talking, you're on the phone, you're just fielding questions, you're trying to find out what they're looking for, you're trying to get information so that you can do a good search for them as to finding something that is going to be a perfect fit for them. In that conversation somewhere, you're going to have to talk about what a property management company or landlord is typically going to look for. And typically they're going to do the credit check, a background check, their income level. And you're just wanting to have a conversation with them about that. When you start to talk about things like that and they say, well, I have great income, I've got great rental history, but my credit is in the tank for whatever reason, anything could have happened. At that point, you may want to talk to them about, well, sometimes there are some places that won't even look at you if you don't have a credit score above a certain amount, but then other places will. So I wouldn't go on just what their credit score is, but from what they're telling you. But what I would do is ask them, is there anything that they have that could possibly help make up for that? A lot of places will ask for additional security deposit money in lieu of credit. Ask them if they're in a position where they're able to do something like a double security deposit. And remind them that, once they were to move out of this house or this apartment, if they leave it in good condition, minus normal wear and tear, that security deposit is generally oftentimes refundable and can really almost be like a little nest egg for them for the next move. But that's just something I like to talk about. But just find out if there's any flexibility with anything they've got to be able to overcome a credit score or something of that nature.
And we also deal with people who either have less than stellar credit, and in some cases with the younger people, students, they may have no credit just because they haven't been out in the world and experienced where they have credit in their name. And in those cases, we might ask them for a guarantor, which could be a parent or, in theory, it could be anybody, but typically it's going to be a parent, could be an aunt, uncle, grandparent, whatever, that would assist in qualifying, and then they would have to co-sign to be responsible for that individual. And we use that tool a lot as well. So we don't just automatically turn people down without reaching out and trying to figure a way to do a deal that's acceptable to us, to the owner that we represent. But that's going to vary from management company to management company and a particular property that our particular property owner that they represent as to what they're willing to accept. Some have a criteria that say if you're below 600 credit score, the answer is no. Or if you don't make 3 times the rent, the answer is no. We in our company don't have those limitations. We'll just use that as an indicator to look and see, okay, this person's weak. What can we do to make a deal? Whereas a lot of other property management companies and our owners won't even make that effort. Go.
All right. I want to speak, a couple people were asking about Section 8.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll let you speak to that, Chris.
Section 8 certainly can be a useful way to fill vacant properties. You need to confer with your owner, the person that you represent, and see if they're willing to accept the Section 8 program. You have to be registered with Section 8. We are registered with the Section 8 here in the city of Denton. And I've got several tenants that are on Section 8 program. And some of our properties we'll do that on, some we don't. And it's going to vary by owner to owner. And I have over 50 different owners. So some are willing to do the Section 8 and some are not. Now, you do have different Section 8s. I've been approached by Section 8 out of Dallas or Fort Worth, and those are different programs, and you have to qualify to be in those programs. In some of the cases, the requirements to be qualified to be in that program or participate in the program are extremely burdensome. Some require all sorts of paperwork. City of Dallas requires a class that you got to go to. I don't have time to go down to Dallas, excuse me, and take a class, so I've declined to participate if someone has a Section 8 voucher from the City of Dallas. I'm sorry, I just don't have time to comply with what they're going to require to take it. But it can be a way to fill vacant units if you have a lot of vacancies.
And Chris is speaking from a property management's perspective. From a tenant perspective, if you get a call from a potential tenant and they tell you they have Section 8, I just got another question that Dennis, does the land, I'm sorry, hold on one second. Deanna, how do we know who does Section 8 with having to call every property management company? For the most part, you really do have to call and find out if they'll accept Section 8 or if they won't. Denton has.
There is in the listing agreement or on the MLS, there's a section to check that you'll accept government subsidized housing. And if that section is checked, then it'll show up on the MLS and you can search for that. But that's not going to be absolute and not going to be true all the time. So you get back to, you're almost going to have to call and inquire if that particular property, if they'll accept Section 8 or not.
Right, right. And that's what I've found anyway, is most people don't typically check that box, but a lot of times, and especially if a home has been on the market for some time, maybe it changes things a little bit as far as what they'll accept and that type of thing, but they certainly don't have to accept Section 8. That is just something that's either up to the owner or the property management team representing the owner.
Hey, Stephanie, I just had one quick question on that. When you're working with a landlord and you're doing leases for a landlord, do they on the certification, do they have to, like, say if they have several different properties, if they want to do Section 8, can they get all of those certified at one time, or do they have to just do it specifically for each one? If you have a person that's going to lease under a Section 8, so they bring you this, they identify that they're Section 8. Now, does the landlord have to do that at a particular time, take the time to get that certified, or can they kind of do that all at once?
Well, it's not the property so much that you qualify. Like I say, I've got 250 properties, and some of them I'll take Section 8 on, and some of them I can't or I won't. So I don't try and go out and certify the properties. It's more along the lines of if I know that I'll take a Section 8 on a property, then I probably would check the box in the MLS that says that I would take government assisted housing, so that everybody would know. Other than that, somebody could call up and say, I'm a Section 8, I've got a Section 8 voucher. Have you got a property? And I'll look over the list and see if we got one that we might be willing to work with in that respect. But I don't try and certify any particular property one way or another. It's just be willing to accept the Section 8 voucher or not. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just kind of ran into it once, leasing a property for a landlord, and I had somebody that asked if it would accept Section 8, and then I think in checking on that, you would have to have, like on that particular property, you would have to have, it takes about 2 weeks or something like that to certify that, unless I got the wrong information, but it takes like 2 weeks to certify that particular property. So but you have a timeline there, so that if you get some other tenants that, you know, are interested in before that, I mean, they might miss out unless you would actually hold that for that Section 8 individual. I don't know if I'm making sense on that or not, but
Well, when somebody wants a Section 8 house, there's some paperwork that's got to be done, and the Section 8 people have to come out and inspect the property. So it is adding to the time involved in filling a vacancy. So that's got to be taken into account for sure. Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, the question, and that's where my question was coming on, the fact that can that all be done ahead of time? So in other words, if you have different properties, can you get them all certified in the sense that if you do have a client that wants to go Section 8, that you don't have to go back and wait those 2 weeks to get that. You could take that person right away. So
I would have to call Section 8 here in Denton and ask if they would come out and pre-inspect and certify. I don't know the answer to that. I've never tried to do that.
okay, appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions about Section 8? Okay. All right. The next thing that I try to talk about up front on the phone is to clarify if they're already being represented by another agent. You know, it's happened to everyone. It's certainly happened to me. I don't ask that question. I get to the property to show them something, and then they tell me that they'll get back with their real estate agent. So just like with any other real estate deal, you want to ask if they're already working with an agent, if they have a buyer tenant rep form signed with another agent. If they do not, at that point, you can let them know that when you guys meet to look at houses, you will bring one of those with you and can go over that with them there. So that's pretty much, at least in my experience, that's pretty much, that will wrap up the phone call portion, or the initial phone call portion from the potential tenant to me. After that, it is going to be my job to go into the MLS and search by their criteria, you know, price range, area, house.
Stephanie, did you discuss, maybe I missed it, length of term of lease that they're looking for?
Oh, yes. No, I did not. I wanted to mention that also can be a good negotiating tool with a potential property management company. A lot of time, well, not every time, but a lot of times if the tenant that you're searching for, if they're willing to sign a 2-year lease, a lot of times that will be very desirable for the property management landlord owner perspective. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And sometimes you can use something like that to help further your client to get that property. If it's a popular property and you know there's going to be multiple applications turned in, and in this day and age, that's exactly what's happening. Anything you can do to make your client look better is a good way to go. So I would definitely ask them up front if they're willing to do a 2-year lease. The owner or property manager may not want a 2-year lease, but if you put it on if you let them know that your client's willing to do that, that's always a good thing.
How about short-term leases?
Short-term leases, those are very far and few between. Most everyone out there that you find is going to want at least a 1-year deal. There are going to be a few situations where, we've got one right now where we've got a home that will only be available to lease between now and the end of December or early, January. And things like that come up, but it's very, very rare. So you can always call and ask or text any leasing agent and find out, is there any possible way that you could work with us on a 6-month lease or a short-term lease, and find out from them. But generally that's scarce.
Very true. It takes as much effort to do a short-term lease as it does a 1-year or 2-year lease. And the problem is on a short-term lease is, say, 6-month lease. In 6 months, you got to go back to marketing the property again and incur additional costs to the landlord, leasing commissions, turnaround, vacancy loss, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a downside to doing short-term leases that I don't very often agree to do because of that. So, but if you have a client that wants one, you're just going to have to get on the phone and call and see, would you accept a short-term lease? And how long? I mean, I've gotten calls for a 3-month lease. And I mean, I guess I would have to be desperate and have a big vacancy problem before I would even consider doing a short-term lease like that, because it just doesn't make any economic sense to do all the paperwork and to move in and all that stuff, only to turn around and have it vacant again and inside of 2 or 3 months. It just don't make sense. But you're going to get those calls that they want a short-term lease, and like Stephanie says, they're going to be hard to find and few and far between, but you will be getting those calls. So it's important to ask up front in your qualifying, what is your game plan? How long of a term of lease do you want? Now, there can be cases in student housing where they're going to be graduating in May or June, and therefore they certainly don't want a longer term lease than that. And we'll have a little bit of flexibility there on, especially some of our apartments, where we might agree to that, because somebody moving out at the end of May or sometime in June, then we still have June, July, and say August to get it turned around and re-rented to somebody else for the beginning of the school year. But those are going to be a little bit, maybe a little bit more, but not as much prevalence in the marketplace. That we'd rather do a year's lease in most cases.
Chris brings up a good point. Sometimes the time of year will make a big difference. Once the peak season has passed and you're into September, October, November, a 6-month lease to some people look a lot, especially some landlords, property managers, look a lot more tempting, because you're at least getting that property through the slow season for leasing. And if they want to lease between November and May or June, that would be just fine, because by the time you have it vacant, that's peak season, and the chance of it renting during peak season is going to be a lot better than the chance of it renting in November. So if you're in that time of year, then that's always something that might benefit you and your client. Just, going to the other landlord, going to the listing agent and letting them know that your client would be happy to, lease during these times and then be out by peak season. That can sometimes be a plus.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So once you have spoken with them and now you're doing your research, you're going to pull all the properties that you find that meet their criteria. And then I would suggest, once you do that, go back through and look. For me, I always want to go back through and look at 2 key things. Go back through and double check that if they've got pets, are pets accepted? Because you might not be thinking about that when you're doing your initial search. You're looking at area and price range and all that good stuff. But go back and be sure that they do, because if they're not going to accept pets and your person has a pet, then there's no reason in even looking at that property. And then if
sometimes it'll say in the MLS either pets are acceptable or maybe pets aren't or whatever. And a lot of times, if you'll call and discuss the situation with the agent representing the property, that you have this prospect with whatever pet they've got, would they consider, even if it says in the MLS that no pets are accepted, sometimes, again, depending on how long the property's been vacant, they might be willing to reconsider if it's not something, like a big dog or a vicious breed dog. They might be willing to accept that. So it'd take a phone call, but you might find a property that would accept your client's pet, where in the MLS it may say no pets. So you just have to make that phone call.
that's a good point. And Shannon, you just said a lot of people don't fill anything out regarding pets. That is so true. Sometimes that just, a lot of times I'll just text the leasing agent and just ask. I usually find that text, of course, works a lot better. I'll just text and say, hey, I've got somebody that is very interested in your property. They have a Chihuahua or whatever they have. Would you be willing to accept that pet? And then at that point, and then whether you're texting them to find this out or it says it in the MLS, you want to double check, what is the pet deposit? Is there a monthly pet fee? Is this going to be a deal breaker? You need to highlight these things for your potential client so that you're giving them all the facts up front, so that you're not wasting your time or their time by going to a house and finding out that the monthly pet fee is $50 and they're just not willing to do that. Yeah. And also, I double check one other thing is just the date available. Be sure that the house is going to be available when your client needs it. Sometimes the house can be shown early, but it actually won't be available for 6 weeks. Or sometimes it's available now and your client is looking for something 6 weeks out, which can be doable, but you will also want to check with the leasing agent. If they qualify and everything goes well, would you be willing to hold the house for 6 weeks if it's sitting vacant or not? And those are things you just want to find out so that, again, you're not wasting anybody's time and going to a house that really wouldn't be feasible.
And also, I got a call the other day. Somebody wanted a rental property, but they had to move on the 31st of the month. And it was a property that we managed, and our tenants weren't moving out until the 31st. So that just wasn't going to work out, because by the time our tenants move out and we do anything to the property, it's going to be a few days into that following month. And you can't have somebody moving out on one day and new people moving in on top of them. It's just not going to work. So that deal wasn't going to work out. So you got to check on the timing of when your clients need something and when the property is available.
Absolutely. All right. So the way I do this next, and this is just in my experience, everybody has their own way of doing things, but at that point, I've now compiled a list of homes that are good potentials for this person that's looking for a lease. At that time, I email them that list of potential homes, and I have them go through that and weed out anything. They may see a house and they really just don't like it. They don't like the vibe of it. They don't like something about it. Cross that one off the list. Again, don't waste anybody's time. Once they send you back the list of things they really might be potentially interested in, at that point, I reach out to the listing agent of all of them. Again, I do that via text. And the reason I do this is because so many times, I know you all know it, but so many times you'll go on MLS and it'll say active and it's already leased or it's pending. And so at that point, once I know what my client is wanting to look at, then I want to reach out to the listing agent and say, hey, is this property still available? If so, do you have any apps working it? You know, are you working any apps on it? And that sort of thing, just to get a feel for where they are in their process so that you can relate that to the potential tenant and let them know. And in such an aggressive market and so many leases are just being swallowed up as fast almost as they go on the market, it is a time saver to do something like that. Then once you hear back, once you know the properties that are available for lease, you take that, you know, you'll meet your tenant over at the first property and you guys will do your tour. If this is the first time you're meeting with the tenant face to face, this is a good time to get that buyer tenant rep agreement signed, go over that with them, as well as the information about brokerage services form. I get them to initial and date that for you as well. Just keep in mind that if this deal goes through, you're going to need that to submit to command anyway. So you might as well get that right up front and, you know, explain to them what the information about brokerage services means, as well as the buyer tenant rep form. Are there any questions about any of that? All right. Once they found a house, they want to move forward as their agent. In my opinion, as their agent, you're doing your due diligence by having them, if it's a written application, have them fill it out. I personally like to take it to wherever it's going and drop off that with their application fee. Not everyone does it that way, and that's completely up to you, but I feel like you're doing a good service to them. And I think that at the end of the day, if you ever want to take these people that you're leasing to today and sell to them down the road, the more you do for them and the more helpful you are to them, just brings so much value to you. So, you know, that's the way I see it. So once you've done that, you turn in your application. I'd also call the listing agent and just let them know, I've got somebody that's really interested in this, and work for them. Let them know, hey, you know, if it works for you guys, they're willing to do a 2-year lease. They've told me that they think their credit score is around 600. They think you might be, if you're looking for, if they tell you, you know, we really don't like to take anybody under 620 or 630, then at that point, if you've had the conversation and this person has agreed, you can say, you know, they're willing to pay extra deposit money, you know, in lieu of the credit, and just work for them. Try to let them know that your person's really interested and this is what we can offer. And then you leave it at that and let them come back to you. Something that I tell people, you don't have to put all your eggs into one basket. I mean, and this is up to them because it involves application fees, and I understand that they can really add up pretty quick. But if they find 2 or 3 houses that they really like, if they're willing to put in a couple applications, that puts the ball more in their court than just hoping and praying that one person accepts them. That can be a good thing, or they can lose a lot of application money. So it's an idea that might work.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so when they're doing applications, say they do what you said, like doing multiple applications, there are some companies that will take their application fee and they'll pull application for applicant 1, they'll pull application fee for both people on that application. And then say they had 2 people that apply for that same house, then they'll pull applicant 2 and then all the people on that one and pull. So they basically say it's $50 a person. So they've made $200 right here by pulling application fees and pulling all that stuff. And then they're going to look for whoever's the best. Now there's no reason why any of those applicants should have been declined, but they'll decline one only because they're not as good looking as applicant 2. So is that right? Can they do that?
Yep.
They can do that.
That is wrong.
I mean, you know, you have to, from the potential tenant, from their side, they have to be willing to once they turn in that application fee, they have to be willing to lose that application fee. And I know, I agree with you, Deanna. I don't like that system so much all the time either, but that's why you want to ask the fielding questions of, hey, we're willing to do a 2-year lease, because maybe your applicants don't look as good as another set, but if they're willing to pay some extra deposit money if needed, or they're willing to sign a 2-year lease, or they're willing to do anything a little different, maybe that makes them look a little bit better to the property management company that you're, or the, you know, the agent that's listing the property.
There was a comment in the chat about filling out the application. Countless times I get an application where a
Yes.
field or 2 or 3 has been left blank. That is an important field, such as social security number, date of birth, some of that nature. I can't run credit and background check without social security number and date of birth. And I sure can't run it if I can't read it. And so many times the person filling out the application, if they filled in the blank where that info is required, they fill it in such a manner that I can't interpret it, and it just wastes my time to try and run something if I can't interpret the information that's been provided, or if the information is incomplete and you have, in the example given, if you have 2 applicants and this one has an application that's complete in every respect that you can read it, and this one here is either incomplete or you can't read the information, which one am I going to go with? Well, absolutely, I'm going to go with the one that's complete and that I can read it. So make sure the information is there and it's complete and legible. Oftentimes, I'll get an application and I got to do follow-up to find out, well, what's their social number, or what is this number? I can't interpret it. Or sometimes they don't put in a current landlord or a current residence. Well, they got to be living somewhere unless they're camping out under an overpass. So we need to find out where they're currently living, and we may need to follow up and do a reference check on that. And if that information isn't there, we're not going to be able to process that application either at all or until we get that information. So if you're representing your tenant as a prospect and you get their application, make sure you look and see all the blanks are filled in and it's legible.
Yes. Yes. Good point, Cynthia, because we get them all the time where the address isn't even filled in. So we have everything, but we don't even know where they're looking to move. So it's so true. Dennis, you said, is there any way we can fill out the application without handwriting? You can do that for your client if you have the time to do that, or if you just want to do that, because we use paper forms. Not everyone does. A lot of people have everything online, but using paper forms, it's really nice to get in a typed application because we can read everything. If I were going to do that, I would use zip forms and go in, and it'll let you fill everything out. They'll of course need to sign it once you've done that, but you can do it that way.
So is there any way that the applicant themselves can, like if we send them the application, like in the zip form one, is there any way that they can go in and then fill that stuff out in there? It would be, if they could, it'd be so much easier, because a lot of times it's on the applications, trying to get that all jotted around. But if you could just do that directly, they could go online, fill it all out, fill the form in, and then email that to us, and then we would have it already complete. I don't know. I was just asking a question.
There may be a better way to do this. I'm not the biggest tech person in the world, but I mean, if they have the version of the only thing I can think of in a true paper form like this, if they're just filling out the TAR form, the only thing I can think of is if they have the version of Adobe where they can go in and fill in the blanks that way. But
Yeah.
other than that, or using zip forms yourself, I can't think of any other way, but I'm sure there are other ways. I just can't.
Okay. All right, thank you. I was just trying to find a way that would speed up the process some way or another, because sometimes by the time you get the application out to them and whatever, then somebody else has already got in line there, you know, and whatever. So the quicker that we could speed that up, the better chance I think we would have of getting that client in there taken care of. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point too. With houses going as fast as they do for lease, getting those applications in as quickly as possible is so key, because Chris says it all the time. You know, what you looked at today, somebody else looked at yesterday or the day before. So and they wanted to wait a day or two to turn in their apps. Well, that's today, the day that you're showing your people. And so I always tell people, if they're really, really interested, I would turn in the application today, if possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've had calls, just like last week, I had a call from an agent wanting to show one of my listings at 4 o'clock, and she called and said, "Do you have anything working on it?" And I said, "No," because I didn't have anything. So she was scheduling an appointment to show it later that day. Well, at 5 o'clock, I got an application from another agent that had already shown it, and we processed that. And the next morning, I accepted that one, where the other agent was out showing it later that evening. It's just a timing issue that there's nothing I can do about that. Different agents showing properties at different times and submitting applications. Even Stephanie's told me that she's been out showing and gave her clients applications and encouraged them, fill them out and get them in. And I say, "Well, I'll get it back to you here in a day or two." Well, in a day or two in these times in Denton, that property may be gone. So
I had that happen to me. I called before I jumped in the car, and by the time I drove to Denton, in the 30 minutes it takes me to drive there, it was gone.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was so angry.
It's so fast. It goes so fast, and
Do you
it's
have
hard
to show every
sometimes.
property?
what?
Do you have? Because I feel like I tell people, like, look, we're in a time right now where you don't have the ability to just kind of go and looky-loo at every property. That's not the way that things work right now. With the market and how fast things change, in the time it takes us to drive over there, it's probably going to be gone. Your best bet is find something you like based on the pictures, and then go for it, and then go see it. But get your application in based on the pictures.
Yep.
So do you always have to show a property?
You know, I'll have to tell you, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I see that you're just wanting to speed up the process. But if they get their application in and they turn in their application fee, and then when they go see it in person, the pictures didn't do it well, or made it look better than it was, I personally would like to show them every property. I do understand what you're saying. I just wouldn't want them to waste an application fee if they walked in the front door and just knew, like, these pictures, they're not what I thought. It's not what I thought it was. And that's the only angle I'm coming from with that. But I know it's hard, and I know where you're wanting to speed up the process. I really do. I just wouldn't want them to lose application fee, you know, if they could walk in the front door and just know it wasn't right, you know. But that's just my opinion.
What else you got?
Basically that's it. Once let's say they've been accepted to lease the home, you know, you just be sure that you're coordinating with the listing agent when they're going to get their keys. You know, make sure you're not just hanging them out to dry once they've been accepted. We see it all. Some agents just don't have anything to do with it after that point, and the tenant is kind of trying to figure out, well, where do I go to get keys? Who do I talk to next? What are the next steps? I would take them through the whole process and make sure to coordinate the security deposit money, the first month payment, where they're going to be picking up keys, and then hand them off to the landlord or the property maintenance or the property management company that will be handling them throughout the time of their lease.
Okay. What else?
Does anybody have any questions about any documents that would be needed for command for this transaction, or does everybody pretty much have that down?
Anybody got any questions on anything? You're all experts and ready to go out and lease everything up.
I just want to thank y'all for, this is great. I mean, this is good stuff. You know, doing leases is a good little way to get some cash flow. So
It can be. And there's, Denton has, the last figure I heard, Denton had 22,000 rental homes.
wow, yeah.
I think that number's probably shy, but that was the number I heard a while back. So there's a lot of demand for rental. And honestly, the younger generation, which Dennis, you and I are past, but
Come on now, Chris.
the younger generation tends to wait a while to buy a home to their 30s or even 40s, and they're still leasing well past when perhaps you and I decided to buy a property. And for whatever reason, and that's immaterial, that's just their lifestyle. So there's a lot of people out there that are still leasing well beyond what used to be the normal leasing years of one's life. And so there's a demand for rental property out there. And there's a lot of investors that are buying property and turning it into rent because there's a market here in Denton for it, for sure. Not just students. With all the properties that we manage, I mean, there's a lot of tenants that we have that are non-students. So it's just more and more that a lot of people are choosing to rent for whatever reason. And renters, y'all know Myra Oliver. I met Myra Oliver 20 years ago when she came to my office at Scott Brown Properties and said, if I bring you a tenant, will you pay me a commission? And I said, yes, I will. And that's where I met Myra, and we've been friends and ever since for 20 years. And she brought me over to KW when she came over 10 years ago. But that's where she got her start 20 years ago. And the point of that is when you lease a property, and if you keep in touch with them, it's just like a person you sell a house to. Keep in touch with them, because at some point in the future, a tenant may become a buyer. And if you lose track of them, then they're going to find somebody else to represent them when they decide to buy. So don't give up on them. Put them on your tickler list or whatever sort of follow-up list that you've got. And in 6 months, a year, or 2 years, or whatever, at some point in time, they may turn into a buyer. And if you've kept in touch with them, they may use you as their realtor. So don't ever give up on all that. And that's the way Myra made a whole lot of money many, many years ago. But Stephanie and we do this all day long, every day. I do it 7 days a week. I don't know if Stephanie quite does it as much as I do. Anyway, but I'm here in the annex, and if y'all have any questions, call, write, text, email, smoke signal, or just walk over to the annex and come in my office and ask. And I'll be happy to help you answer any questions I can on leasing. Like I said, I've been doing this 50 years, and I own a management company, so been there, done that, got the experience, got the plaque on the wall and all that stuff. And I'm very happy to help any of you guys that on any of your questions on leasing or any other aspect of real estate for that matter. But that's the gist of this call today, is how to help in leasing. So always happy to help and answer any questions that you may have anytime. What else anybody got? All right.
All right, yeah, again, thank you very much. Appreciate y'all.
You bet.
Thank you guys.
Thank y'all for being on the call. If that's all we got, then let's go out and lease or sell something.
All right.
Have a great day.
All
Same
right.
deal. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much.